In this video, we'll be setting up our species for an offshore tournament in WebPro Tournament Manager. And we'll be just looking at the base scoring settings and specific scoring settings for each one of the species. So let's say this tournament is marlin and sailfish tournament. So we'll have maybe a blue, a white, and our sailfish. And let's say that we can also, it's maybe not just release. We can set up the releases as well, but we'll also set up some scoring for dead fish as well. So real quick, let's just jump over to the base scoring settings. So that's underneath the logo here, clicking that tournament settings button. And when that pops up, click the scoring tab. And let's take a look at what kind of formats we've got here. So for us, we do want points and we do want weight. We're going to be able to have to look at both. If you were just a release tournament, you might just want points here and you don't really care about the weight. The defaults are pretty much set up here. I think the only change here is that we went down to the hundredths on the weight format. And everything else looks pretty good. We're going to go ahead and keep the default points to 0. And we're going to set the points specifically for each one of the species as they come in. So everything looks good here on the scoring tab. We're going to go ahead and hit save changes. And let's add in our blue marlin as our first species. So we're going to, right next to species, we're going to click add species. And we'll type in blue marlin. I don't know if yep, we've got that already in the list. And I'm going to check this box here. It says make changes to the species after adding to tournament. And that's so we can set the scoring for that blue marlin. So at least on the release side. So I'm going to go ahead and click add species to tournament. It's going to open up that edit box for the blue marlin. We're going to keep our catch type as primary. The only difference between primary and secondary really is do they get points by default? Do they get those default points that we saw in the tournament settings? Since we really didn't use them, we're going to keep them as primary. It's just going to keep them in the list. Again, there's really not much difference between primary and secondary. If we're using tagging, if we care about that, we can set the default of the tagging to no or yes. In your tournament, you might set it to yes if you think the majority of your fish that are going to be caught or released are tagged. I'll just keep that as no. And our scoring tab, we've got a points per catch here for our blue as 250. I'm going to keep that as 250 points. I'm going to lock those points so our data entry people cannot change that 250. That is always going to be 250 for our blue marlin, so they can't change it. And one of the things I'm going to do here with these last two options is I'm going to, for all the blue that come in as releases, I'm going to hide the weight field. And for all the blues that come in as dead fish, I'm going to hide the points field. So when we select catch, so in this case, when we select catch, when we're the weighmaster and we select catch, or the data entry person, that points field will disappear. So you just get the weight. Then that way they can't confuse themselves when they're entering in catches. And when they're entering in releases, we're going to hide the weight field. So they just see that 250 points and they don't see a place to put in the weight. So this is a pretty good setup. These two options here for most offshore tournaments, especially those that are mixed between both releases and catches. And we'll go ahead and save changes for that blue. Let's go in and add the white now, white marlin. And I'll make changes to that as well. And everything looks normal here. Our default points for our white will be 150 instead of 250 for our blue, because let's say we're centered more on blue on this tournament. Again, we'll lock those points so they can't be changed. And we'll do the exact same setup as we did last time. So we're going to hide the points field for catches, and we're going to hide the weight field for releases. And finally, we got a sailfish, so we got to put their sailfish in here. And we'll make changes to that as well. It's primary, it's fine here. And our points, let's give 50 points for every sailfish. We're going to lock those points. Or maybe these points are variable. Maybe it depends on something, some you know, who knows what. But let's say it's variable, so we'll keep those points open, and we'll leave the points field and the weights fields fully displayed for both of these. So our data entry person can actually make some more intelligent changes as the sailfish come in. And we'll see what that looks like now that we've got our 3 species in here. So now if we go over to where we're going to enter in our catches, which is right here, this event log icon on the top right corner. If you click that, you'll see your catch submission form. So now we have a catch submission form that's has a really basic setup. And we're going to change this so that we can see all of the options. This is not the default setup, and we're gonna add some of those defaults back in here. So I'm going to go to the right here corner here to customize this catch form, customize this form. I'm going to click that. And I'm going to turn on a lot of these fields that are hidden. And I'm going to turn on the points field. You may have these turned on already. And you may want to put in also as well the tagged option. The include in scoring option, you can turn that on as well. That lets you enable or disable whether the catch affects or the release affects your leaderboard. So if you had this toggle, we'll toggle it on, and I'll show you what that is, where it shows up, and I'll explain it to you once we get in there. And let's say we're going to go down to a single event count, and let's say our default event type is release. So let's say the majority of what we are going to see in this tournament are releases. Or at least for this part of the weigh-in. We can always change it for different aspects of the weigh-in. So let's say the first half of the day is releases, and then when it comes in later, our catches, we can always come back here, customize this form later on in the nighttime, and change it over to catches. So I've got our default species. Our first one's going to be blue marlin. We can always change it as well. And let's go ahead and hit Save Changes down here. So it's asking to add a catch release for, we only have one person set up in our registration right now, John Smith on test boat 1. But if we had multiple, they would show up down here in this list. So let's enter in a release for John Smith. And we've got our blue, and as you know by our blue marlin setup, if it's a release, we are not going to be showing the weight. We're just going to be showing the points. And notice I can't even change it if I wanted to. I can click. I can't change the points. If I wanted to make it so that I can actually change whether it's a release or a catch, I can go over here to customize this form, and I can enable event type, which is this here. And I can now change that. So if I can now make it so that I can either add in a catch for John, a release for John, or a catch. And notice that the weight now shows up. If it's a catch, it's a dead blue, I can add in a weight. If it's a released blue, I'm adding in just the points here. And I have the option to turn on or off tagged, whether it's tagged or not. And here's that included scoring that I was talking about before. This lets you hide it in the leaderboard. So if you hide it from the leaderboard. So if you have a release and you're not 100% sure if it was John Smith or somebody else, but you want to put it in there and come back to it later, you can uncheck include in scoring, and then it will show up here, kind of grayed out, and then you can go back to it later and make changes. So let's enter in one release for John Smith, and if we click add event here, you'll see that John now has 250 points with his blue. And he comes up again, and he's got a white. Now he's got the white with 150 points, and this one's tagged. And we're going to include that one in scoring as well. So now he's got his, 400 points now. And there's the little tagged icon. And let's say now he's got a sailfish. And our sailfish, you notice that when we were doing the setup, we had both the weight and points showing. He gets his 50 points. And it's a release. So we've got our release 50 points. And let's say he's got another sail and it's dead. And maybe your dead do get 50 points. Who knows? However you want it. Maybe not. But in this case, let's say he has his sailfish and I I don't know. It's a tiny little one. And let's make it 25 pounds. And again, John has his sailfish, and he gets 50 points. And if he didn't, I could always set that to 0 because now I didn't lock it. I could make it change, and I could add it. So now he's got a sailfish in here with 25 pounds, and he's got a sailfish for 50 points, plus his blue and his white. So that's your basic setup for an offshore tournament. Again, you can continue adding more species. You could add dolphin, tuna, etc. All the way down whatever offshore species that you want to be part of your tournament. You can always add in a species. So let's say we do add in dolphin, and we don't want it to have any points. But we just want to have maybe a register that the dolphin was caught. So we're going to make changes to this once it goes in. It's a secondary catch because it doesn't really get any points. We're going to keep the points as 0. We don't care about anything else. And now when we go back to the event log, our catch log, and we can now add in a dolphin. It has 0. I think we left it tagged as default. But we're going to go ahead and add that. Whoops. Got to add it in for John. And now we have a dolphin in with 0 weight, 0 points. This is great for if you had a leaderboard, for example, if you wanted to count the amount of dolphin that were caught. And you could do a catch count leaderboard. So you can say, the amount of the most dolphin caught. You don't care about the weights, but the most dolphin caught or released, you could have a leaderboard for that. All right, so that's the typical setup for an offshore tournament. It can be more complex than that. The scoring setup is again as complex as you want it to be, as many species as you want it to have, and whatever settings you want them to have. We're not going to cover the leaderboards in this video, but this species setup, with this species setup, you can have pretty complex leaderboards that include one or more of the species. Can count weights, count points, count again catch counts, whatever you'd like. And so with that setup, you should be pretty good to go for your offshore tournament.